My talk today concludes a 3-part series for September of a book, and that book is called Lighter: Let Go of the Past, Connect with the Present, and Expand the Future by Yung Pueblo. Rev Shannon kicked us off a couple weeks ago, and she gave this beautiful message about how we can release our tethers to our past. And then ministerial student Shelley Walker last week talked to us about connecting with the present and how presence is linked to a healing mindset. Such great talks. I highly recommend, if you missed them, to check them out. They were so wonderful. And they're really grounding in what I'm going to expand on and share with you today. So my talk today is about the individual healing journey and how that relates to expanding our future, our collective future. Yung Pueblo, which is the pen name for Diego Perez, he tells us that in order to relinquish suffering and to identify with our true nature, and our true human nature is love, that it's important to be aware of what healing really entails. I know when I started out on my healing journey, just cognizant of it anyway, it was about 20, we're always on a healing journey, right? But about 20 years ago, I was very cognizant that I was committing to a healing journey. And when I started out, nobody told me anything. It was just like, meditate every day. Okay. And boy, were there a lot of bumps and rocky issues along the way. So I really want to share with you today some of the wisdom that's in this book first around what a healing journey is. What is it? What is it made up of? So that we can then kind of go into how to expand our future from there. So a healing journey ultimately is a path to a new concept of self. It is a way to a new identity that is ever evolving and fluid. Healing is not linear. So this is kind of where we get hung up sometimes, this idea that healing is supposed to be this nice, neat, little progressive step laid out path. That's not what healing is. It's actually very necessary and very normal for healing to be all over the place. For there to be highs, for there to be lows, for there to be back and forth movement. This is actually how we really integrate and really continue on that upward trajectory towards newer and newer expressions of self. We have to have what we might perceive as setbacks. This is something that nobody ever told me, and I wish they had, because I had so many what I thought were setbacks, and I had so many moments where I was on the floor just like, I'm not healing at all. This is pointless. And I don't know what sometimes kept me going, to be honest, but something kept me going. So I'm here to tell you today that these things that we think of as setbacks, when we're continuing to kind of relive our old patterns, our old wounds are surfacing, and we think they might be regressions, these are actually necessary for us to process our old patterns from newer and newer perspectives. So even if we react to the old pattern like we usually do, even if we get lost and we react to our anger or we react to our jealousy, if we can catch ourselves and see it with clarity, even in hindsight, we are slowly integrating our wounds. So it's very important that these old patterns emerge as we're on our healing journey. It's really common in spiritual circles to hear that analogy of the onion layer, peeling back the layers of the onion. I have never come across a truer analogy for what healing really looks like. So when an old pattern comes up, we will have a certain level of awareness that we can process it from. And if we practice our tools that Shelley so beautifully shared last week, engaging in meditation and journaling and inner work and prayer, if we do those things, we will naturally start to see these old patterns clearer and clearer. And those onion layers will peel back, and then we'll have a new opportunity at the next layer of the onion to address those patterns again. This is not a regression, okay? This is not a setback. I had a client text me last week and said, Sarah, Will I always be like this? And I could feel the pain in this text message, and I could feel how sad he was. And I remember looking at that text message, and I could feel his heart, but the first thing I thought of was, oh my gosh, in the 2 years we've been working together, you're not even the same person. So I could see clearly in all of his back and forth movement, in all of his perceived setbacks, I could hold that space for him and see clearly how much he's grown. And the reason I'm sharing this with you today is be mindful of who's supporting you on your healing journey. Do you have a close friend? Do you have a family member? Do you have a therapist, a practitioner? Do you have somebody that's there to remind you the truth of what's happening? This is so important because we can get in our tunnel vision and very limited view around what we think is happening when we're healing and judge it the way that we judge it without that higher perspective. It's very easy to do. So that's who I am for my client, and I strongly urge that you find that person or people for you as well to remind you that you are not going backwards. It's impossible to go backwards. It's not if there is a plan, it's not in the plan, let me tell you. Okay? We are ever evolving into greater and greater expressions of love. We cannot go backwards. So as I said earlier, since healing is part of building a new concept, after periods of deep healing, you've got to make room for the new. So if we're spending too much energy thinking that we're still the old because it keeps popping up here and there, then we don't have that energy for the new to come in. So we have to let ourselves be new. And it's a powerful practice to notice how you internally label yourself and also how others label you. You do not need to subscribe to those things. This can take practice. When I was a little girl, actually from the time I can remember, I was always, as a little girl, very rigid and controlling. I liked to have everything a certain way. I used to tell my mom I didn't want to have friends over because I didn't want them to mess up my stuff. Okay? This is the kind of little girl that I was, okay? And it's very funny now. And as I've gotten older, that kind of protectiveness of my space and how I wanted everything organized and everything to look, that stayed with me for a very, very, very long time. Even in my early days in my marriage with my husband, and he just loved it. He just kind of accommodated whatever I want. Everything has to face this way. The towels have to be folded this way. He just kind of was right on board for it, which was great. And then in 2017, I had my first child. And then in 2018, I had my second child. And they are wonderful, chaotic, messy, unorganized little beings. And I love them with all my heart, but boy, did they snap that right out of me. Because if I was going to sit there and be, you have to sit like this, you can't get any crumbs anywhere, if I was going to do that, oh my gosh, can you even imagine? My poor children, my poor self. So I had to let it go. And I still, even today, my youngest, oh my goodness, you'll say, hey babe, can you go clean this little tiny thing up? Right? Just this little, maybe 10 toys. Can you clean this up? You walk away, you come back later. He's built a whole new thing with it. It's scattered everywhere. Oh, okay. Still not cleaned up, huh? This is my youngest, right? Just no regard for what I feel about anything. He's got his own agenda, and I love him for it. Bless his heart, he's a strong, strong little man. But what I want to say is that I had to let go of all of those rigidities. So this was we're in 2023. This was about, 6 years ago. It's been 6 years that I've had to practice letting go of who I thought I was. And now, every time I hang out with my family or I hang out with somebody who knew me before I was a mom, that kind of will creep in. They'll start to label me as the rigid Sarah, the one that has to have everything folded and I start to take it on for a moment, and then I pause and I'm like, wait, that's not me at all anymore. That is not me. I'm incredibly flexible with my family, and I'm a lot more flexible in my work environments. That is not me. So I'm telling you this story today to really question when people from your past start to label you and when you start to take that on. Really create room for what's new. So young Pueblo says that you will know that you're getting closer to your true nature when you're getting closer to unconditional love, when you are releasing your concept of I, of the self. There is no I in unconditional love. Love is ever evolving, ever expanding. Love is fluid. Love is not fixed. So when you start to let go of that more and more and more, you're getting closer and closer to your true nature. So question who you are with openness. Healing should lead us to a greater flexibility and to an ever-expanding idea of self-concept. And so this is another very important point that we want to explore here today, and it's this idea of what we focus our attention on. So I mentioned earlier, if we're spending too much attention on our old concept of self and we're putting too much energy into what we used to be, we don't have enough room for the new to expand. So I want to bring up attention today because it's so easy for our attention to get aligned with unhealed wounds in our bodies. And this is especially important in the world we're living in today with social media. I would be remiss if I didn't bring that up today. So social media is designed to play on our unhealed patterns. It's designed to play on our cycles of addiction. And I'm not saying quit social media. I'm on social media. I run 2 businesses on social media. So don't quit it, but be very mindful of what you're getting caught up in and lost in social media. Young Pueblo, there's a quote from him, and it goes, "If the online media that we use to connect with each other are insidiously enhancing our craving and placing us in bubbles where we only see our own preferences, we will not only deepen our mental tension, but we will curtail and slow down our personal growth." So when I say social media, I'm talking about Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, whatever, Twitter's now X, whatever Threads, whatever platforms you're on. There's this potential for us to get kind of lost in our own little bubble. And if we're in our own little bubble, we can't expand into new concepts of self. Social media is designed to play on mental tension, on unhealed patterns. It plays, again, into addictive cycles. So it's so important to address our relationship to social media when we talk about our reality of our healing journey and what it looks like. If we are in the little bubble, it is so easy to just assume that we're on the good side of things and to not question anything and to not really look at what's going on the other side. And again, this can be uncomfortable, but it's necessary for where I want to take you in this talk, into global expansion, into global healing. Another beautiful quote from young Pueblo: "The ego loves when other people think the same way it does. It craves similarity. But this is in direct conflict with our freedom. We need to teach ourselves to have the mental agility to appreciate a diversity of views." Not adopt a diversity of views, appreciate a diversity of views. The news, social media, influencers, commentators of all kinds, they're all bidding for your attention. Why? Why are they bidding for your attention? It is the most powerful thing that we have. That's why. One of the most powerful choices that you can make in your healing journey is to make the choice to align your attention with your values that should ultimately be rooted in love. This is one of the most powerful decisions you can make as a person. It's one of the greatest aspects of control that you have over social media. Now, this might be difficult. Again, social media is highly addictive. Believe me, I know. Sometimes I'm scrolling and I'm like, oh my gosh, an hour went by. Wow. So I get it. But if we can kind of find a balance, a nice balance with it, and start to maybe practice that mental agility and expose ourselves to maybe some things that make us a little bit uncomfortable, this is a real point of growth for us. And we have this beautiful opportunity with social media to seek and find so much information to help us kind of crack out of our bubble. So, if we are spending the majority of our time on platforms that only show us the bubble, then we kind of lose touch with the ultimate experience of unconditional love. We need to be able to humanize one another, and we need to be able to humanize those with different viewpoints. This is going to be so important in creating the world that works for everyone, in creating the world that we want to see. About 2 years ago, in 2021, I don't even know why, but I got this calling on my heart that I needed to start looking at opposing viewpoints and really looking at them. And I still don't know ultimately why, but I started really looking into it. I started watching commentators that I didn't agree with. I started looking at humor that maybe was not normally, that I would normally be offended by. I started to look at these things, not to adopt it, okay, but to see what was going on inside of my body when I looked at these things. And what I found, the more that I did this, the more that I practiced this, what I found is that my identity started to shatter. It started to crumble. And not because I adopted any sort of opposing viewpoints, but because I found that I could hold space for all of it. I found a place inside of myself where I could hold it all. And it has profoundly changed who I am. I am not the same person that was here in 2021. I am not the same person that was here in 2022. And a lot of that has to do with this call on my heart to be able to enter into that space of mental agility, to be able to hold what I thought I wasn't. So when I loosened my grip on my identity, it allowed me to broaden my understanding and broaden my compassion. This is key here. This is how I loosened my self-concept, one of the ways that I loosened my self-concept. And this is how young Pueblo says that we can enter into what he calls a new era. This is where we expand our future. The new era, according to young Pueblo, is one of structural compassion. So we see compassion in our systems, in our economics, our finances, in our politics. We see compassion in our social issues. We see it everywhere in this new era. But we must first find it in ourselves. In this new era, power does not trickle down like a triangle from the top to the bottom, but power is shared and cooperative. This is something that I really believe that we're moving into. And this is something that I really believe that young Pueblo is speaking to as well in this book. It's hard to see right now because things look really messy, right? They look messy right now. But this is the healing journey, the highs, the lows, the back and forth movement. This is what is needed to truly integrate and heal and expand and evolve. It is part of peeling back the layers of the onion. We cannot bypass it. We can't fly over it. So we have to peel those onion layers back with conscious attention and awareness. Young Pueblo also said, individual healing and global change have to move together as one. If we want to successfully forge a new global peace, we have to move together as one. The individual has to take responsibility for their own healing journey. And please, when I say this, know that I'm not saying you have to do it alone. This is really important, especially when we talk in spiritual circles. There's sometimes this idea that I got to meditate by myself, pray by myself, journal by myself, and then I'll get the healing that I want. You don't need to do it alone. And oftentimes, if you've had a lot of trauma in your background or other things that have dysfunction in your family, it's really, really necessary that you don't do it alone. Be in spiritual community, find a guide, find a therapist, find a support group. Do what you need to help you get outside of that bubble, that tunnel vision, so that you can see what you are becoming instead of what you have been. So important. Lao Tzu said, if you want to awaken all of humanity, awaken yourself. This is exactly what Young Pueblo is talking about. If we want a world that works for everyone, if we want to see true global peace, true global expansion into love, the individual healing journey is what we have control over, and it is where we start. We can't fly over the individual healing journey to get to the global healing. So this is very, very important. When we do our own personal work and engage in spiritual practice, there is a powerful creativity that emerges. This kind of creativity is not something that we could have guessed or imagined from that lower state of awareness. It emerges as we expand into more and more of our true nature. So our healing, our peace is needed for the peace of the world. And this creativity is what allows us to see new ways of coming into greater harmony and balance. At the very end of this book, Young Pueblo mentions 4 steps to a path to a better world. These are steps to practice. They might look messy at first, but I love these 4 steps because I feel like it's what I've been embarking on the last 2 years, and I didn't even read the book, and now I read it, and I said, oh, great, he's doing it too. This is so wonderful. I must be onto something. So these 4 steps are so great. The first one is selflessly listen to each other. Listen to people without an agenda. Listen to people without trying to gain any sort of victory. Listen selflessly, just to listen, just to be the space in which someone else is heard. Number 2, stick to your values that are rooted in unconditional love, that are rooted in love. And some of you might be saying, well, how do I know my values? How do I know if they're rooted in love? Watch Shelley's talk last week. She talked a lot about spiritual practice and how practicing presence brings us to a healing mindset. It brings us to a healing mindset because it brings us in touch with what our true values are that are rooted in love. So watch that talk from last week. It is great on how to know that how to see yourself with clarity. Number 3, I almost said 2, 3, wrong fingers. Honor your current perspective without attachment. Honor how you feel about things, honor what your opinions are, and try to honor it loosely to see if somebody from the other side might be able to teach you something about the world or about yourself. Number 4, never allow yourself to dehumanize anyone. I've done it. I've dehumanized people. I've watched my family dehumanize other people. It can be so easy to get caught up in that. I've dehumanized former presidents. It's so easy to get caught up in this person is bad. They're doing the wrong thing. And while I'm not going to go over people's actions, when we start to dehumanize, we are out of touch with unconditional love. And this whole talk is not about justifying the world or justifying other people's actions. It's about our own personal individual healing and how it relates to the expansion of global healing and our future. And so if we're dehumanizing, all of a sudden we're out of alignment with unconditional love. So be very mindful. And again, all 4 of these practice. It's not meant to be perfect right away. You might slip up in moments, and that's okay. Your spiritual practice will help you stay rooted and see things clearly so that you can just get right back up where you left off and keep placing that attention on the new, on what you're becoming. There is an unbreakable link between your personal healing and the expansion of love in our world. I want to conclude today with a quote by Young Pueblo that I think is so beautiful. I highly recommend take a picture of this quote, write it down, put it up in front of your face to remind you of your power and of what your healing journey means. Healing is the realm of heroes. It really is. And every tough situation we go into won't necessarily end with a victory. There will be setbacks, tears, and heartache. But there will also be life-changing revelations, new freedom, and tremendous evolution. So don't look for the victory. Don't look for the linear progression. Look for the gradual changes and look for your new found insights and perspective along the way. Thank you.